The studio was buzzing with energy the moment Kelly and Conway leaned forward in her chair. Her tone was sharp, her words cutting, and it was clear she had chosen Representative Jasmine Crockett as her target that evening. With the cameras rolling and the audience on edge, Conway launched into a pointed attack, criticizing Crockett's record, questioning her motives, and trying to paint her as unprepared for the challenges of leadership. But Crockett didn't flinch. She allowed Conway to finish, her calm expression only making the tension in the room heavier. Then, with deliberate precision, she spoke. Her response wasn't loud, but it carried a force that immediately drew every pair of eyes in the studio. She began by dismantling Conway's claims one by one, pointing out inconsistencies, highlighting overlooked facts, and showing mastery of the issues. She never raised her voice. Instead, her words carried the kind of confidence that could not be shaken. The more Crockett spoke, the quieter the audience became, until the studio was so still that even Conway looked unsettled. Crockett then pivoted to a broader point about accountability, integrity, and what it truly means to serve the public. Her phrasing was crisp, her delivery unshakable. Every line seemed designed to leave an impact, and it did. By the time she finished, the air had shifted. The panel was silent. The crowd erupted into applause, and even the host was visibly caught off guard. The show had stopped in its tracks, not because of Conway's attack, but because of Crockett's striking response. Clips of the moment spread online within hours. Viewers described it as a masterclass in composure under fire, a reminder of how strength doesn't always come from shouting the loudest, but from speaking with clarity when it matters most. Jasmine Crockett had not only defended herself, she had turned an attempted attack into a defining moment. The host, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, tried to step in with a new question, but the audience wasn't ready to move on. They wanted more from Crockett. The cameras caught Conway attempting to regain her composure, shuffling her notes and forcing a smile, but the damage had been done. Crockett leaned slightly forward, her eyes fixed on Conway. "You can attack me all you want," she said firmly, "but what the American people deserve is honesty, not spin." The words struck hard. A ripple went through the crowd, half gasps, half cheers. Conway, unwilling to concede the spotlight, snapped back. She accused Crockett of dodging responsibility, trying to reframe the debate in her favor. Yet every sentence Conway fired off seemed to fuel Crockett's calm but powerful counterpunches. "See, that's the problem right there," Crockett replied smoothly. "You've mastered the art of distraction. But distraction doesn't fix real problems. It only delays solutions. And I refuse to waste time on games when people expect answers." The audience broke into applause again, forcing the host to raise his hands in an attempt to quiet the crowd. Conway's expression stiffened. She had entered the exchange expecting to dominate the conversation, but Crockett's poise had left her struggling to find her footing. Even the commentators watching behind the scenes whispered among themselves. Crockett had turned what was meant to be a humiliating ambush into an undeniable victory. Conway tightened her jaw, clearly unwilling to let the moment slip away without another attempt to regain control. She raised her voice this time, hoping sheer volume would cut through Crockett's calm presence. "The people watching know who's really avoiding the truth," she declared, her hand slicing the air for emphasis. But Crockett didn't flinch. She allowed Conway's words to echo in the studio, then leaned into her microphone with a composed smile. "The truth isn't something you can shout into existence," she said steadily. "The truth stands on its own, whether you like it or not." The crowd reacted instantly. Cheers erupted, with some members of the audience even rising to their feet. The host looked from Conway to Crockett, realizing the debate had become less about policy and more about a clash of credibility. Crockett seized the moment. "When I show up to work, I don't have time for rehearsed talking points. I have constituents depending on me, families who can't afford games on television. If you want to talk about leadership, let's start with accountability. Can you name a time you admitted being wrong to the American people? Conway froze for a split second, her prepared answers no longer fitting the script. The silence that followed was louder than any argument she had made so far. The cameras zoomed in on her face as the audience buzzed with anticipation. Everyone knew this was no longer just a debate. It was a defining moment. The silence pressed down on Conway as the audience waited for her answer. For the first time that night, her confidence wavered. She forced a laugh, trying to brush off the question, but the nervous edge in her tone was obvious. Well, unlike some people here, I don't spend my time making speeches for applause, Conway retorted, attempting to redirect the attention back to Crockett. But Crockett didn't allow the deflection to pass. She tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "This isn't about applause," she said, her words cutting through the air. "This is about respect for the people who put their trust in us. They're not props for a performance. They're the reason we're here." The audience roared again, louder than before. Even the production crew, normally silent and hidden in the background, couldn't hide their reactions as whispers spread across the set. Conway, growing flustered, interrupted with a barrage of talking points, firing off accusations about policies and political divides. But Crockett waited patiently, never once raising her voice. When Conway finally paused to take a breath, Crockett leaned forward with a line that stopped the shouting cold. "You can repeat the same script as many times as you want, but repetition doesn't make it real. Facts do." The host, realizing the moment was spiraling into something unforgettable, tried to interject, but the audience wasn't letting go. Conway had come to attack, but Crockett's responses were shaping the entire narrative of the night. Conway's frustration was now impossible to disguise. She leaned closer to the table, her voice sharpening with every word. "You talk about facts, but the reality is your side has failed this country. People are worse off, and you sit here pretending everything is fine." The statement was meant to land like a finishing blow, but Crockett barely blinked. Instead, she slowly turned toward Conway, her expression steady, her voice measured. "If you think the people are worse off, then ask yourself who created the mess they're in. Who benefited from the divisions you fueled? Because leadership isn't just about pointing fingers. It's about taking responsibility." The words sliced through the room like a blade. The audience reacted instantly, applause drowning out the end of her sentence. The host raised his hands again, struggling to calm the excitement, but the reaction wouldn't stop. Conway tried to push back. "That's a convenient dodge. You still haven't answered for your failures." Crockett leaned in closer, her tone dropping just enough to force the entire studio to listen. "I answer to the voters every day. I show up. I fight for them. Can you say the same? Or are you more concerned with keeping your name in the headlines than keeping your promises?" The studio erupted, half the audience cheering, the other half stunned into silence. Conway's expression faltered, her rehearsed arguments slipping away as Crockett's words landed with undeniable weight. In that moment it was clear. Conway's attack had backfired, and Crockett had turned the debate into her stage. The audience energy was electric now. Every camera angle seemed locked on Crockett, capturing her calm but commanding presence. Conway shifted uncomfortably, aware that the momentum had completely slipped away. The host, desperate to regain control of the discussion, asked Crockett to give a final thought before moving to the next topic. Crockett didn't waste a second. She folded her hands on the desk and looked directly into the camera. "My final thought is simple," she said. "The American people are tired of manufactured outrage. They are tired of being told what to fear instead of being shown what can be fixed. Leadership is not about who yells the loudest. It's about who listens, who acts, and who delivers." Her words carried a weight that hung in the air. The audience burst into cheers, some even chanting her name. Conway's face tightened, her attempt to smirk barely concealing her frustration. The host tried to move the show forward, but it was too late. Crockett's response had already stolen the spotlight. Social media feeds began lighting up with clips of her remarks, hashtags forming in real time. Viewers across the country were sharing the moment, calling it a masterclass in composure, and a shutdown heard around the nation. Conway had entered the debate with an attack, but Crockett had turned it into a defining moment, and the whole country was watching. Within minutes of the broadcast, social media platforms exploded. Clips of Crockett's response began circulating at lightning speed. One video, showing her leaning calmly into the microphone as she dismantled Conway's argument, had already racked up hundreds of thousands of views before the show even ended. The hashtag started trending. Phrases like, "Crockett shuts it down," and "truth over spin," appeared in feeds across the country. Commentators and everyday viewers alike praised her poise, calling her words surgical and a masterclass in political debate. Meanwhile, Conway's team scrambled to counter the narrative. They rushed to release statements online, insisting she had landed strong points, but the internet wasn't buying it. Side-by-side clips comparing Conway's flustered reactions with Crockett's controlled delivery only fueled the perception that Conway had lost the exchange. Even late-night hosts began teasing the moment, playing the clip of Crockett asking, "Can you name a time you admitted being wrong?" A line that instantly became meme-worthy. By morning, the headlines were clear. Conway had attacked, but Crockett had emerged as the undisputed winner. What was meant to be a routine segment had turned into a cultural flashpoint, with Crockett's striking response dominating the conversation. And for the first time in years, Conway found herself not in control of the narrative, but buried under it. By the next morning, the political landscape was buzzing. Major news networks replayed the exchange on a loop, dissecting every pause, every expression, every carefully chosen word. Analysts from across the spectrum agreed. Crockett had not only held her ground, she had flipped the entire debate into her favor. One commentator on a primetime panel remarked, "This wasn't just a response, it was a statement of dominance." Crockett showed that composure beats chaos, and that's why it resonated. Another added, "Conway tried to rattle her, but Crockett turned the attack into fuel. That's the mark of a seasoned fighter." Editorials poured in. Headlines called it the moment that stopped the show and Crockett's defining night. Even outlets normally critical of Crockett had to acknowledge her command of the stage. Meanwhile, Conway faced a different spotlight. Clips of her fumbling silence and forced laughter spread as viral memes, casting her as unprepared and outmatched. Supporters tried to defend her performance, but the sheer volume of praise for Crockett drowned out nearly every rebuttal. For Crockett, the moment became more than a victory. It was proof that her style of direct, steady leadership could cut through the noise of politics. What began as an attack had become a launchpad, elevating her voice onto a much larger stage. Crockett didn't waste the momentum. The morning after the broadcast, she stepped before reporters outside the Capitol. Cameras swarmed as journalists shouted questions, eager to capture her first public statement since the showdown. She spoke with the same calm authority that had electrified the studio. "Last night wasn't about me versus anyone else," she began. "It was about telling the truth when the truth is under attack. It was about reminding people that leadership means service, not performance." The line landed instantly. Headlines raced across news sites, framing her as the politician who had drawn a line in the sand. Reporters noted her refusal to gloat, even as her opponent's stumble dominated the news cycle. Instead, Crockett stayed focused on her message: accountability, solutions, and integrity. Conway, meanwhile, tried to downplay the incident in her own interviews, calling it overblown drama. But her words sounded defensive, and every denial only seemed to highlight the exchange even more. Social media once again lit up, with Crockett's speech clips spreading as fast as her debate remarks. Memes labeled her as unshakable, while political blogs called her statement a power move wrapped in humility. It was clear. Crockett wasn't just surviving the attack. She was turning it into a defining chapter of her career. Inside Washington, the ripple effects were undeniable. Lawmakers who had previously dismissed Crockett as a rising but untested figure now found themselves rethinking her place in the political arena. The viral clip wasn't just a flash of internet fame. It had translated into real credibility. Behind closed doors, staffers whispered about the moment. One aide to a senior senator reportedly said, "If Conway can't shake her, no one can. Crockett's here to stay." Even some of her critics admitted, though reluctantly, that her composure had shifted the balance of respect in her favor. On Capitol Hill, colleagues approached her with a new tone of admiration. Where before there might have been polite acknowledgement, now there was genuine interest in working alongside her. A few even floated the possibility that she could play a bigger role in shaping the party's messaging going forward. Meanwhile, Conway's misstep became a cautionary tale. Analysts warned future commentators. Attacking Crockett without substance was a dangerous gamble. The lesson was clear: her ability to flip criticism into strength was unmatched. As word spread through Washington, one headline summed it up best: "Crockett isn't just trending, she's ascending." The show had ended days ago, but the impact was still echoing loudly through the halls of power. A week after the explosive exchange, Crockett stood at the podium of a packed auditorium for a scheduled town hall. What was originally planned as a routine local event had now drawn national media, eager to see if she could replicate the fire of that unforgettable night. The crowd greeted her with a standing ovation before she even spoke. Cameras flashed as Crockett raised her hand to quiet the cheers, her expression both humble and commanding. "This moment we're living in," she began, "isn't about personalities. It's about priorities. People don't care who shouts the loudest on TV. They care about whether they can afford groceries, whether their children are safe, whether their communities are heard." Every line seemed to deepen the connection between her and the audience. Reporters scribbled furiously as she continued. "Last week, I was challenged on national television. I didn't respond with anger. I responded with facts. And the truth is, facts don't need a performance. They just need a platform." The hall erupted in applause. Journalists noted the seamless way she tied her viral moment to her broader message, transforming a televised clash into a rallying cry for her political mission. Even the evening news anchors, normally cautious with praise, highlighted her ability to seize a viral wave and steer it into substance. Crockett had not only weathered the attack, she was now shaping the narrative herself. Across the country, the response to Crockett's town hall was immediate and intense. Supporters flooded social media with clips of her speech, praising her for cutting through the noise with a message that felt real and grounded. Hashtags like "Facts Not Spin" and "Crockett Rising" trended for hours. Commentators on morning shows marveled at her ability to stay consistent under pressure. "What we saw at the town hall wasn't just a one-off," one analyst remarked. "She's proving that her composure on television wasn't luck. It's who she is as a leader." Critics, however, scrambled to find new lines of attack. Some accused her of capitalizing on drama, while others tried to paint her as overhyped. But the more they tried to minimize her, the more her supporters pushed back, amplifying her voice even louder. In living rooms, coffee shops, and community centers, people debated her words. Many said they appreciated how she stayed focused on real issues instead of engaging in petty squabbles. Even those who didn't always agree with her policies admitted she had struck a chord. One headline captured the mood perfectly. From viral clip to national voice, Crockett is here to stay. And for Conway, the reality was unavoidable. Her attack had become the very event that propelled Crockett to a higher platform. Inside Washington, the ripple effects deepened. Crockett's rise wasn't just a media phenomenon anymore. It was beginning to shift the political balance. Committees where she once had to fight for recognition now leaned in when she spoke. Colleagues who had underestimated her were suddenly careful with their words, knowing she had both the sharpness to respond and the platform to make it go viral. Behind the scenes, her opponents grew uneasy. Strategy memos circulated warning that direct attacks on Crockett tend to backfire. Advisors whispered that she had become too dangerous to underestimate. What began as a single clash with Conway had evolved into a narrative of resilience that her rivals couldn't escape. Donors and grassroots organizers alike began taking notice. Requests for Crockett to headline events surged, and her name appeared more often in discussions about future leadership roles. The question wasn't whether she would grow more influential, it was how quickly. Meanwhile, Conway found herself under scrutiny for the opposite reason. The very moment meant to weaken Crockett had damaged her own reputation, with analysts pointing out how badly the exchange had spiraled. Her allies grew quieter, reluctant to attach themselves to what many now saw as a miscalculated attack. It was becoming clear. Crockett had not only won a debate, she had changed the conversation in Washington. Crockett knew momentum alone wasn't enough. She had to turn it into action. Just days after her town hall, she stepped onto the House floor with a bold announcement. New legislation aimed directly at addressing issues her constituents had been demanding for years. The bill was ambitious, tackling cost-of-living pressures and government accountability. Critics expected her to make a symbolic gesture at best, but what they got instead was a carefully crafted proposal with bipartisan elements that even skeptics had to take seriously. Her speech introducing the bill echoed with the same steady conviction that had made her viral. "This is not about headlines," she declared, her voice carrying through the chamber. "This is about delivering results for the people who trusted us to lead." The timing was perfect. Journalists immediately connected her move to the viral moment with Conway, framing it as proof that Crockett wasn't just about words. She was about action. Editorials praised her for striking while the iron is hot, and cable news panels debated how the proposal could reshape the conversation in Washington. Even lawmakers who disagreed with her politically admitted she had seized the moment. One senator privately remarked, "She's no longer just defending herself, she's setting the agenda." For Conway, the sting deepened. What had started as an attempt to diminish Crockett had become the very spark that elevated her into the spotlight of serious leadership. The arc that began with Conway's sharp attack ended with Crockett standing taller than ever. What was meant to be a moment of humiliation had transformed into a defining victory. From viral clips to packed town halls, from trending hashtags to legislation introduced on the House floor, Crockett had turned defense into dominance. In the final days of coverage, one news anchor summed it up perfectly. Conway tried to stop her, but instead, Crockett stopped the show. Her calm, measured responses had resonated far beyond the studio lights. To her supporters, she became a symbol of resilience. To her critics, she was suddenly a figure too powerful to dismiss. Even those who once ignored her name now spoke of her as a force reshaping the national stage. Conway, meanwhile, found herself stuck in the shadow of the very exchange she initiated. Analysts noted that her attack had not only failed, it had created the conditions for Crockett's rise. And for Crockett, the lesson was clear. In politics, the sharpest weapon isn't anger or volume. It's clarity, composure, and truth spoken at the right moment. That night, she had proven it to the nation. The show may have ended, but her momentum had only just begun.